Welcome to Amra's Armchair Anecdotes. I'm Amra Pajalic, writer, teacher and storyteller. Pull up a chair and let's dive into stories about writing, life and lessons learned, sharing wisdom from my armchair to yours. You can find the episode show notes, your free episode handouts and my how-to guides at amrapajalic.com/podcast. And now it's time to dive in. So welcome to Amra's Armchair Anecdotes. In today's episode, I'm talking to Dr. Katherine Firth. She's been developing research writers for over 15 years. Currently, she's a senior lecturer in the Research Education and Development team at Trobe University and head of the Lisa Belair House, is that how I say that? Belair House at the University of Melbourne. Co-founder of the award-winning Thesis Bootcamp program. She maintains a writing blog, Research Degree Insiders, and she's co-author of the books How to Fix Your Academic Writing Trouble, Your PhD Survival Guide, and Level Up Your Essays. And her most recent book is Writing Well and Being Well for Your PhD and Beyond. Welcome, Katherine.
Thank you so much for having me today, Amra.
Thank you. Now, I'm talking to you in my academic life and in my academic journey. So I'm just going to read a little bit of my academic introduction and bio. So I'm an award-winning author, educator, but I'm also a PhD researcher of Bosnian heritage, exploring representations of the Bosnian genocide in fiction. I'm blending storytelling with historical analysis to confront dehumanization and preserve a cultural memory. My novel, Time Kneels Between Mountains, and my accompanying essay collection explores the legacy of the Srebrenica genocide. And I'm here because I was awarded first prize in the La Trobe University 3-minute thesis competition. And it was a fierce competition. There were 10 amazing competitors. And I won a 4,000 prize to help further my academic journey, which I'm very excited about. So we're here to talk about the 3-minute thesis program and what it is and what it does. I get your perspective as someone who supports students in that journey, and sort of get my perspective of someone who has stumbled into it as a student and won this amazing prize, and yeah, just sort of contextualize that. So first of all, I thought, can you tell us what is the 3-minute thesis competition?
Thank you, Amra. And before I do, to say congratulations again, well done. You were absolutely, like, it was such a fierce competition. There was really complex debate about who would win. So to have achieved that is a really great outcome. And also, it's lovely to get to talk to each other again as we're going to kind of described through this. The process of preparing for the university finals was quite intensive. We spent quite a lot of time together. So it's really great to catch up just this little bit later and see how it's all going and reflect on what was a really intense experience, I think, for everybody involved. Certainly it was for me. I personally have been involved in supporting the 3-minute thesis preparation for about 15 years now. The whole program has been going on for a lot longer than that. So the 3-minute thesis was invented by the University of Queensland nearly 2 decades ago. It's become first a national and now an international competition, culminating in the Asia Pacific finals, which have only just taken place. The competition is simultaneously extraordinarily simple and incredibly challenging. The challenge is for PhD candidates, so people in their second or later year of their PhD, to explain their research in 3 minutes or less. PhDs are 80 or more thousand words. They take 3 or 4 years full-time study to do. They're done by people who already have school, undergraduate, masters, and quite a bit of high degree by research, PhD level research already in the bag. And at that moment, we're like, so can you just do that really quickly and do that in a way that somebody who's not in your discipline, not studying what you're studying, not an expert in that way, can follow. So we have at the finals at La Trobe, for example, those 10 candidates, they came from biomedicine. We had a person who was doing a thing about like how people in farms work out what flies and other insects are eating stuff. We had a person who was looking at like how dieting was impacting male mice's brain power. We had a person who was trying to help midwives on placement be more effective. Like everything was being covered. And then we had you, Amra, and you were telling your story, um, both of your about your novel Time Kneels Between Mountains, and the context and wider research you were doing around how that sits in literature. So, you know, creative writing, literary studies, recent history. So all these different kinds of things are happening, and people have to be able to understand them wherever they come from.
Yeah. Well, I kind of stumbled into it because I had to do my presentation to, like come in and to the department. And then they were like, okay, we're asking for people to enter the 3 minute competition at the department level. And because I was finally at a point where I could see my thesis, I actually had a bit of clarity about what was going on with it, because that for a long time I felt like wading through mud, where it's like, what am I trying to do here? What am I trying to write?
It's-
I just entered it because I thought, oh, this is a good academic credit, because I'm thinking about, my future academic journey and trying to, get into the university sector. And I was like, oh, this is great, an opportunity just for an academic credit, just, to speak at the department. And there were some prizes, where there was like, $500 first prize, and, 300 and 200, I think. And so I was just like, oh, that's great. I didn't even know that there was more after that. So when I did the actual, so I practiced, I rehearsed, I thought, oh, this is good as a teacher, that I can talk to my high school students that I teach about oral presentations and preparing them. I'm always telling them cue cards and, practice and all of this. So I thought, okay, this is good, gave me that extra reason to do it. So I did that presentation, and then they were like, oh, you've won. And then they're like, and now do you wish to represent the department in the next heat? And I'm like, oh, there's a next heat.
and there are so many rounds because there's the department. So at La Trobe, as in most universities, there's like schools and departments do them, and then it goes up to the university finals, and then it goes on to the Asia Pacific semi-finals, all of which you got into. And then the finals, yeah, so it's like it's layers and layers and layers. Amazing.
It is. And then also I didn't realize what a big deal it was. Because when I got the department one, and then was in touch with Anthony, who what can you explain Anthony's position?
Oh, he's the director of graduate research. So every department has an academic who helps coordinate all graduate research sort of training, ethics, admin, works with all the doctoral supervisors, is a first port of call for students who need to go above their supervisor for whatever reason, and interfaces with the central graduate services for things like policy changes and things like, please, can you find me a whole group of people to do 3 minute thesis, because that's a really important part of what they do. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he was like, okay, now you're going to do one-on-one coaching. And so that's where you came in, where I met you. And so we spent like an intense hour where I was reading my speech to you and going through it line by line. And we were tightening and looking at, in a sense, what was interesting for me was looking for codes for how to sort of tell what the story of my thesis, but how to use coded language. So I remember we were talking about, this romance that I had, and you're like, Romeo and Juliet romance. And as soon as we use that code, we know that it's a doomed romance in a sense.
Yeah, because there was a stage where I was like, did they get together and live happily ever after in the end? And you're like, no, no, that's not the story.
Yeah. And so it was really fascinating because, for me to write that first speech, I had to go online and I found like an outline that I could use to write the structure. And then I was editing and really trying to get it down. And then it was just interesting how we really then went into it further, word by word, to really kind of strengthen every bit of it. Um, and then also there was a little bit of, rehearsing with you, and you giving me pointers. And the other thing that was important and I sort of didn't realize was the slide and the
Mm.
slide. So you only get one static slide that you can have as your background. So that was another really important thing that you had to think about, and how will that, connect with the audience. Um,
What was actually really interesting is that the way that we worked together, every person I worked with, what they needed was totally different. So I had some people where what they kind of really needed was more of like the emotional heart of the story. Or I had other people where the things that weren't clear were really obvious things. I was like, you've used a whole load of acronyms there. I don't know what they mean. No one else will know what they mean. With some of the science people, I had a lot of time with Lockie, who was doing the one about the flies and other agricultural insects, getting him to explain it to me and then me trying to explain it back to him. And he was like, no. And we had to go around a few times. And then he was like, that. And I was like, okay, so that's the version that people who are non experts will be able to understand. Because he was turning all of these insects into some kind of DNA soup and then doing maths to it. And I was like, I really was struggling to understand that. But in the end, we got to a point where I can now tell you that he was putting insects into a DNA soup and then doing maths with it. And that will tell you whether or not you've got lots of kinds of insects eating your fruit and vegetable. So some of the people, that was what they needed. You, because you're a writer, were really already ready to do that kind of line edit. But that's a thing that only creative writers already know how to do. So it was also really interesting that the way we worked together was much more the way I work as a writer myself, at that sort of really line level, whereas other people needed something different. And so we did something different. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing in a sense, like that's the challenge because you're doing it to your department first. They understand what you're talking about. And you don't realize in a sense if you have not translated it enough for the layperson, for someone who knows nothing about your research, and you have got these 3 minutes where you have to tell them that.
Absolutely, that they understand it and also that they've already bought in. That you're doing it. We have a cancer research centre. Everybody in the cancer research centre absolutely believes that killing cancer is the most important thing. They've all already given their lives to it, and so that wasn't a hard sell. That's also not usually a hard sell. Most people agree that that's really important. Whereas we have other kinds of projects where people had to explain,
Mm.
actually, my research might not sound like it's very interesting, might not sound like it's really relevant, might not sound like it's important, but actually it is. And here's how, even though you've never thought about it before, it's actually really relevant to you.
Yeah. So what would you, in terms of people who, like me, stumbled into it and were like, okay, I'm just going to do it for my department as, the academic credit, how would you advise them to sort of start the process? Like for me, it was finding the structure for how to write the thesis and sort of putting it together based on that. What other tips do you have?
The main thing that is important is really to understand why it matters to you. Human beings really respond to other humans' they really respond to your authenticity, to your feelings, to your passion. And so if you've worked out why you got into it, or remember why you got into it, perhaps years and years ago, then that can really help you connect to the kind of, electric third rail, the kind of heart of the story. And that then, I'll go a long way listening to people who I have no idea what you're talking about, but I know you care. And that really is something that can bring audiences with them. When we run the workshops, so there were workshops about this that we run to support that. We've got an online module that kind of gives advice about it. So we sort of also give some technical advice around it. And we definitely recommend that people spend time to to identify what their story is, give some kind of beginning, some kind of middle, some kind of end, um, and to start and end with something that's really strong. One of the candidates for the finals didn't make a time to see me one on one. And I was chatting with my colleagues later, and they were like, was that the person who didn't come? Because they could guess. And what was really obvious about it was that his beginning and his end were not as strong as the people who'd really rehearsed. Start with a joke, start with a like unbelievably shocking and surprising or enormous fact. Start with how it relates to you, start with why it matters, those kinds of things. People are really keen to come along if you'll just give them a way in. So really give them a strong way in, and then really kind of return to that in the conclusion, so they can remember it when you've walked off the stage, because then they can remember what it was that you said. So when they're voting for you, they're like, oh yes, that one, that was really strong, that was really significant for me.
So there's also, I'm sure every university will sort of have some of the things that you were talking about in terms of the modules, in terms of opportunities for to talk to people. So, getting those opportunities, taking advantage of them, is something that we're really sort of saying is pivotal. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's like starting, you don't have to start with a blank page. You don't have to do it on your own. It's been going forever now. You can also jump online. UQ has really great resources, has videos of previous winners, and a whole range of things. Most universities will also have that. So you're not starting with like, what do I even do? You can go and listen to a whole load of people whose work sort of looks a bit like yours and go, oh, that's how they've tackled it. I could do something similar. Yeah.
Well, I was very silly and I didn't do any of that. So I was completely blind.
Also, break the rules, do whatever, have a go, because as you can see, even just stumbling into it, it's easy enough. The idea of it, I've just got to explain it in
Yeah,
3 minutes.
I
I mean, it
think
was challenging, but it also wasn't impossible.
no, I think I mean the advantage for me, as you said, is that I'm a writer, and so that creative background and the writing part held me in good stead. And then also I've had a lot of experience with public speaking. So I came in with those two strengths, but I did really find the opportunity to get the coaching from you, and then later with Anthony for the final and that refining really, was invaluable, really made a difference. I just also wanted to talk about in terms of the, we had the department heat. So that was just in a room in the university with, people who showed up. But when we had the actual La Trobe heat, like that was full on because we had a rehearsal beforehand in the actual space to see the auditorium. And then on the day, there was live streaming and recording, and you as the MC. So, yeah, I just wanted you to contextualize that also.
Absolutely. So the 3 Minute Thesis is one of our flagship whole of university researcher development events. And it had been a little bit pre-COVID, it was massive. It was bigger than Ben-Hur. There's no way you wouldn't have known about it. It's gone a bit quieter. It all went online for a few years and then we were sort of bringing it back. And this year I was like, no, we're going all out. We got good budget for it. So the Graduate Research School really kind of invested in it. We searched reams of different rooms at La Trobe and settled on the Agora Theatre, the cinema rather. So for people who don't know, La Trobe University has had a whole theatre and a whole sort of art cinema. I was just talking to somebody who I was at a leadership course with the other day, who was like, yeah, actually, I got into film. He's now had a global streaming film television career because he got into film going to the ag cinema for $5 back in the 90s. So like there's really beautiful stories which people often tell me about their connection to this space. So but it's a full cinema, huge, loads of chairs, beautiful space right in the center of campus. We did a full dress rehearsal because I was like, nobody, I used to do student like productions. So I was like, you need to know, will my shoes make weird sounds on the floor? How, if I wear this outfit, how will the microphone like clip to my lapel, because everybody has worn the shirt that like got pulled off by the microphone or that made weird sort of swooshy noises as you were trying to present. What does it feel like to present to this space? But we were doing it with nobody in the audience. And on the day, there were like 80 people in the audience. There were, I think, three different video cameras. There was a photographer or two. There were two photographers, in fact. So it was bigger than Ben-Hur. And for most people, especially either the biggest thing that they'd done like that in a very long time, and for some people, the only time they'd ever stood up in what was basically a television audience, a live television audience, broadcasting right across the state. La Trobe has campuses right across Victoria and across the world. We had audience from all over the globe. So it was a really, really full scale event. Um, and it's yeah, and then we take video from that event, and that video goes off to the finals, which are all up on the UQ website. Yeah, so it's a really big, really full scale experience with catering afterwards. And it's one of the things that we really see as one of the few ways that we bring people together physically and synchronously across the Trobe.
Yeah, I mean, I was so relieved I was there for the dress rehearsal and I really had that chance to prepare. And also we had a conversation where my topic is quite dark and it's about genocide. And I was like, put me on last because I bring the mood down. And so I think that worked very well. But yeah, it was
Absolutely. There was an original one where we had yours, and then the next person's story had lots of jokes in it, and it was not good. Yeah, no. Yeah, so
It was, yeah. So that's the other thing that you sort of need to take into account, those transitions in terms of mood and how to, because yeah, some of the speakers were everyone was so charismatic. I was completely shocked that I won. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about is I could not memorize my speech to save my life. And I think especially being a writer, I'm very tied to like every single word having to be exactly perfect the way that I wrote it down. And so for me, trying to actually memorize the whole thing and go in without anything was not something I could do. But so many participants did just get up there and did not have any aids. And so we had that conversation where I was like, can I have my cue cards? So I just thought, yeah, if you could sort of flag that and talk that through a bit.
absolutely. So the rules say you can have memory aids, so cue cards, your full script, and those are absolutely permissible. We usually recommend that you don't because it's quite difficult if you're going to speak up, speak out, project to the audience, make eye contact if you want to gesture, if you're like me, and you make lots of hand gestures, the chances that I would throw my cue cards is I used to do debating at school and absolutely captain of the debate team. My cue cards, the number of times I was like, oh no, they have gone flying, was quite common. So there's some of that kind of stuff where we're like, look, if you can memorize it, there's a lot of benefit to it. Um, Also, for most people's talk, the big your big points are much more important than any of the details about how every particular word kind of interlocks with every other word. But I think that kind of goes back to both the sensitivity of your topic and the way that we were workshopping your talk from the beginning, that we were really interested in the words and the kind of exact pacing of the way you talked about what you did. So for you to wing it would have been much harder than somebody else who had their talking points, but if they were a little bit fudgy in how they got from A to B, it was probably not going to be quite as significant. Yeah, so you can have a memory aid, but we often recommend that you at least try to go with that.
Yeah, so I just wanted to talk through the technical aspects of my memory aids. So I did my speech in Word 18 font, nice and big, because I can't read things without my glasses. They had to be nice and big. I printed off the cue cards about this size, so on a 10 by 10 centimeters. And then I did staple them, I numbered them and I stapled them so that I would not lose the order and they would not fall out of my hands, because that's something, yes, I was nervous about. And this is the advantage of being a high school teacher and seeing students presenting and some of the pitfalls that they had. So afterwards, I was speaking to the judges and I watched my speech and I actually did not look at them that much. I was able to maintain eye contact significantly. I had actually learned quite a bit of it, but I just could not, trust myself not to have that exact order, and to have that exact flow. And also, yes, the language was very important in terms of the words that I used. So for me, that was the best decision, and I managed to win with that. So I guess that's one thing to think about in terms of what your speech is like. Is it something where you can tell the story and capture the general story of it? And there are also people who are using their slide as the memory aid, where they were actually using it to tell the story of their thesis, and they were able to do that. So, I guess the point to be made is there is no one way of doing it. Each thesis and each topic and each discipline will inform the way that you might want to do it. But I just want to make others like me feel okay about the fact that, yes, you might need a memory aid. And then we recorded again for the Asia Pacific final. So I worked with Anthony on that draft also. And I recorded that on my phone, and I have an app that is an auto cue app. And so I was able to revise with him again, put it on the app and record myself on my phone, and do another version that was tweaked again for the final. And most of that was still pretty much the same, but there were some changes, but because it was an auto cue and I re-recorded it. And so that's the other thing, that, it might change each time. If you are progressing, you do have that opportunity to refine, to improve.
And you really should. People who do the same thing, the thing that will win at your school heat, everybody else is revising and improving it. So you absolutely want to keep going to improve it for these bigger and bigger audiences. It occurs to me that as you were talking, that one of the big differences is that science researchers, when they go to conferences, tend to give conference papers where they talk to their slides. So actually, the big points are up on the slide and then they sort of talk to them. Whereas when I go to conferences, I have a full script and have always had a full script. That's just normal in my discipline. And people say, oh gosh, it's really boring when people read stuff out. And I'm like, no, it's not, because we're good at it. We really do. We present with energy, we present with, real passion, but we know that the words are really the right words because that's how we communicate our research. So I think that's the other thing, is that if you're from a discipline where presenting with passion from a full script is a thing you're really good at, you may find that that's a really great strategy for something like 3MT.
Yeah, and I think like with writing, with all of my stuff, even all of my writing things, it is very much because it is about the words. And I have now presented at a few conferences, and I do have the slides with some quotes, some key quotes or key images. And you mark those in your speech so you know to click next. But it is very much the way that it is structured, and it is the way reading it. Um, I also wanted to talk about, this is what I've been really interested in, because I knew generally, like, I don't really know much about academia. I'm doing a PhD. I've been doing it 7 years part-time, so I've been very disconnected from uni life because it's a part-time thing. I work in
Mhm.
my day job. And so I did it because I'm like, I know that if I want to get into academia, I need credits, I need to have connections with the university. So that's why I entered it. So I guess I just wanted to also get your perspective in terms of what are the opportunities that it affords? How does it help?
So it helps in such a lot of different ways. In terms of specifically academic positions, look, anytime you win anything, yay, that's a little trophy on your shelf. So if you are entering it and you do well, that does make a difference. We often, though, really talk about it in a whole range of other ways that it connects you to people. So you go to your school heat, you talk about your research in front of your peers. Suddenly, a whole load of people who had no idea who you were, what you were doing, have heard about your research. So that then, when they bump into you in the graduate common room, when they walk past you in the corridor, instead of just being like, hi, they can be like, hi, Amra. Is the book out yet? How's it selling? What's going on? What's your next project? Because they actually have something to talk to you about. So it really builds what we call intellectual climate, some kind of connections between researchers, and builds your profile within that smaller place. We know that in conferences, lots of conferences now have things like poster competitions or panel discussions. In those, having 3 to 5 minutes to kind of talk about your research is really normal. So for a lot of people, it's really helpful to get out there and kind of talk about what they're doing to their industry, to other researchers in their discipline across the nation, across the world. We know that industry partners are not very interested in reading 80,000 words of anything, but we absolutely know that they're often asking researchers to come in, give a really quick pitch or explanation to potential investors or to, participants or to clients or customers or patients or whatever the people might be. And so the ability to walk in and go, here, you know nothing about this, but I'm going to tell it to you in a really engaging way in about 3 minutes is a really powerful tool. And we know it's a really powerful tool in the media. Where one of the ways that researchers often find really challenging is we're discovering this amazing stuff, and it's really hard to explain to other people what we're doing. Where are people getting their information from? Podcasts, newspaper articles, little videos on YouTube or Instagram. The ability, therefore, to go on, do something really engaging in that sort of short snack type way is also something that really helps people get their story out to the wider public who might be interested. Yeah, so many ways that it's useful.
Yeah, well, I found for me, it really helped me restructuring my thesis, because using that structure to develop the 3 minute, um, I realized that one of my chapters, I had not addressed my argument adequately. And then also some of the codes that we had developed, the shortcut codes, I was able to use as my signposting and sort of look at the flow of what I was writing. So it helped me with that, but it also helped me in a few other ways. Because I've been, part-time and I'm not on campus as much, I haven't been really connected with a lot of things in the university. And so I've been actually paying attention more to emails. I mean, I was always reading them, but I wasn't like, oh, this is something I should be doing. So I've started looking at other things to enter, other opportunities in this time I've got before I submit, and those doors are closed. But the other thing is I've written a book of essays based on my research. And so my plan is to use my prize money to apply for further grants, to develop that into a podcast, a historical podcast, telling the story of Srebrenica. And so being able to say I received $4,000 from La Trobe University for this prize and I'm using this for my research will hopefully make me a strong candidate for funding and create more opportunities in that way in terms of that sharing of my research. And I remember having a conversation with someone and they're like, but what's the point of the podcast? Are you going to make money from it? And I'm like, no, probably not. But this is the thing, we're researchers and we're writers and we're creative people, and we come up with ideas that we just want to share. We just want to get out there. And so it's looking for those different ways and different opportunities to share these ideas and share these things that we've discovered, that we've learned, for other people to learn.
I love the fact that this whole competition, which is about making people's research more accessible to other people, even in a really short way, is going to turn into something like a podcast series, that, just really gives people the opportunity to understand these really important, nuanced, these codes that we were using, these really like jam packed full of meaning. And we rehearsed, is it a Romeo and Juliet romance, is it a different kind, so that we really were getting the story right. That you're going to have a chance to unpack that in the way that I love to listen to really discursive podcasts. I hope people like that too, because this is definitely what we're doing today. um, but like that we're going to have that that you that accessibility is just building more accessibility, because that's amazing. I love that.
That's the thing. And I think what I got out of this is I just really wanted to encourage more people who are in my position where you're just working solo on your thesis, on your writing. The only people you're engaging with really on an ongoing basis are your supervisors, and they're the only ones that sort of know everything that's going on. And just, having that opportunity to, because I loved meeting the other researchers. I loved sitting in the auditorium and hearing all these other researchers speaking about their writing and their ideas, and what they had discovered with passion. I've connected with some of them on, LinkedIn, on social media. And so that opportunity for connection is really, key. And just, you never know, like one of the things that I've discovered along the way is some of my best ideas have come through just random conversations with people where I'm just talking about something that is going on with me, and suddenly someone throws something into the conversation, and my brain starts spinning on it. And that's what these opportunities are also. It's that opportunity to sort of talk to people in the same position and see, where could it take you? Could it be another collaboration? Could be a sharing of ideas? So yeah, it's been really wonderful, and a big confidence booster, which we were talking about also, because
Yeah.
you're sort of like, I think this is important and I think this is life-changing, and sort of getting that confirmation and hearing from other people after, the 3 minute thesis, and they hear what you're doing, seeing, people's interest. just confirms like, yes. And for me, if I had any doubts about making this podcast a reality, they have now very firmly been put to bed, because it's like, no, this is something that is important. This research is important, and keep moving forward towards that goal. So yeah, it's been a wonderful journey, I have to say.
Ah, that's precisely what we're hoping happens for everybody at every stage of the competition. I mean, obviously, you've had this and your work is so important and will have such, such significant reach, so that's absolutely fantastic that you're feeling that at that level. But even the people who just participate in their school level heats have often said, ah, I had people listening to me really hard for 3 minutes and then later coming up and saying, I had no idea about this. This sounds really fascinating. Can I hear more about your research? And for the first time, they felt like actually their research matters to people who aren't their supervisor. Yeah, so I think that that's just for every level. It really does have that really huge power. And obviously, the further up the chain you go, the more that is amplified. Yeah.
Well, even when I did the presentation, not the 3 minute thesis one, but just where I had to do a
Mm.
milestone presentation, I ended up being the only one. And so for a whole hour, it was just having a conversation with everyone in the room where I just kept talking about my research because the questions kept coming and observations, and I had that moment where it was like, oh, this is, this matters. What I'm doing matters. So that's the other thing that I really like. I think that this is a new thing now with when you're doing your thesis, you have to actually do presentations either at your department or but your supervisors have to be there. And so there have been those department presentations. There've been virtual ones. There were ones that were happening at like a pub, where people were meeting, and then now, also at the university. And they really matter too, because when you do have to articulate as you are progressing, like obviously every time I've presented, for the first stage, the middle stage, the end stage, the presentation has been different. I've been figuring out what I'm talking about, figuring out my focus. But doing those presentations did help me through that process and did help me get there.
Yeah, it's almost all universities around the world have some requirement for a presentation right at the end, either as part of your viva or as a pre-submission sort of presentation. But it's become more common to expect people to talk as they're going because, as you say, there's this moment. Sometimes it's been 7 years, like you, and you're like, does anybody care? And that's actually not a feeling anybody should have in the university because universities are communities of scholars and we do care. We're so interested. And so it's so powerful to both be creating your ideas in conversation, as you say, but also to have people like clap at the end and be like, that's great. Like, no, people don't give you enough claps in academic life. You should have more.
No, and yeah, like it does really. I think also one of the things that I was talking to my supervisors and to other people is like that end, it becomes even harder right at the end somehow.
Mm.
I think that fatigue accumulates, and the fact that you're going through so many drafts, and each time supervisors are getting more and more sort of, rigorous in comments and in feedback. And so somehow it gets harder. And so having these moments where you're connecting and you're having that bit of a boost, it helps you kind of push through and get that momentum and get that impetus that you really need. Because I did, there were quite a few stages where I was like, I'm pulling out.
Mhm.
No, I think I'm done. And I would have, different people like, come on, I've had my daughter, I've had my husband, I've had my supervisors, I've had my, PhD friends, like, oh, come on, you're so close. Are you sure? Let's just, one more, come on, you can see the light. So you do sort of need that community around you, because even though it is a solo project, it is exhausting.
It's so hard at the end, and so everything you can do, that kind of gives you these moments of light, bright encouragement are worth pursuing.
Mm. So I just wanted to check, were there any other tips and tricks, anything that you think that we sort of might want to mention for people who are wanting to enter the 3 minute thesis?
Go for it is my main advice. There's so much to be gained, in terms of understanding your own project, in terms of connecting with other people, in terms of getting encouragement, in terms of building your skills, whether you're interested in academic progression or going out into industry, or just, when people say, oh, so tell me about your research, instead of going, oh, at a barbecue, oh, don't worry about it, nobody would understand it. You're like, actually, I've got a really good version. Do you want to hear it? It's got jokes in it. So whatever, or not in your case, but I have a novel that you could read, that I highly recommend. Time Kneels Between Mountains. Um, but you have ways of kind of connecting your research to other people. So no, nothing to lose, everything to gain. It's a really affirming process. It's scary, but it's also so rewarding. So definitely go out, have a go. 3 minute thesis. I mean, I've been championing it for years and years because I see just how good it is and just how good it is for candidates. And so, yeah, anybody who's listening, have a go.
I agree. I have to say, as I said, it was just an academic credit, and I was very nervous. I was practicing for like 2 weeks. Every day I went into a quiet room on the day and I was practicing it again over and over to try and lower my nerves. But then when I came to the presentation, because it was so nice and informal and it was just the department, I didn't feel intimidated. I was like, no, I can do this. And I kind of calmed down. When I had the heat where it was like in the Agora Theatre and everyone, that one was nerve-wracking. And that one, but I think the good thing about that, because I was last, and I was watching all these amazing presenters, I was like, oh, I don't have a hope in hell of winning. And so by the time it came to me, I was like, I'm not winning this thing. I'm just getting a certificate of participation and another academic credit on my CV where I'm like, I did this. And so I went up there and I was like, okay, yeah, that's fine. And so apparently my face was quite comical when I was announced as the winner, where I was like, so if there's footage of that, that might be a good laugh for someone. So I guess the point is you just never know. Like, I play the lotto every week. I'm like, I've got to be in it to win it. And that's how we need to look at some of these things. You just got to give it a shot. The worst thing is you won't win, but at least you'll get the experience out of it. And it is a very valuable experience.
Nothing to lose.
No. Well, thank you so much, Catherine, for having the opportunity to have this conversation and to really sort of broaden this discussion about the 3 minute thesis and hopefully help some other graduate researchers who are wanting to think about this to make that leap.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me on your amazing podcast. I hope it keeps going from strength to strength, and can't wait to hear the next one when it comes out, about your essays and your research.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Thank you for listening to my interview with Dr. Katherine Firth about the 3 minute thesis competition. I will now be including my 3 minute thesis application, so you'll be able to listen to it. This is the one that went to the Asia Pacific heat, and I will also include a link to the initial La Trobe heat, which is the one that I won. Thank you. 30 years ago, 8,372 men and boys were murdered in Srebrenica. It was the first genocide in Europe since the Holocaust. Yet for many, it's a footnote if they've heard of it at all. As a Bosnian whose family lived through this war, my perspective is shaped by two things: my personal background and my creative practice as a novelist. My research asks a simple question: who gets to tell the story of Srebrenica, and how should it be remembered?
One of the most powerful ways in which the story is told is through writing, because literature does not merely reflect history, but actively reshapes it, circulating memories in ways that challenge official silences and dominant narratives. I study 2 novels by non-Bosnian authors that deal specifically with the Srebrenica massacre: The Unquiet Dead by Osma Zahana Khan and Bratzo by Leslie Ann Ryan. Khan explores pluralism, propaganda and international failure. Ryan centres peacekeepers but sidelines Bosnian voices. So I look deeper, into author notes and acknowledgements. How much research did they do? Who did they centre? Because when you write about genocide, your choices shape memory. Both authors missed a fundamental part of the Srebrenica story, the urban-rural divide that shaped who lived and who didn't in the enclave. I'm doing this because I am a writer myself. Using a creative practice methodology grounded in historical fiction, I have addressed the research question by writing my novel, Time Kneels Between Mountains, set in besieged Srebrenica during the war. The medium of historical fiction allows me to address the gap that I identified in the existing literature, the urban-rural divide. I crafted a cross-class romance between my crime-fighting Romeo and Juliet, Ramo, a young man from a rural village, and Seka, an urban-born survivor and original resident of Srebrenica. Their love unfolds against the 1995 genocide. Like Titanic, the characters are fictional, but the tragedy is real. If we don't question how Srebrenica is written about, distortion becomes truth. Fiction isn't just made up. It's where we remember, reckon, and rebuild. My thesis exposes misrepresentations and demands accountability. For my family, this genocide is not a footnote, and through my PhD, it has become the novel.
Thank you for tuning in to Amra's Armchair Anecdotes. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and follow for more insights, stories and inspiration. From my armchair to yours, remember, every story begins with a single word.